Hey you guys, this is Josh with Homesteading Family, and I'm out in the main crop garden. It's late fall and it is time to put this garden to bed for the winter. So today in this video, I'm gonna just take you through some things to think about as you are putting your garden to rest, why you wanna do this, and then just some key elements that are gonna really clean things up for the winter, but more importantly, are gonna make things much easier for you and give you a better start in the spring. So putting your garden to bed for the winter is really, really valuable. It is going to, one, preserve some of your tools like your sprinkler system so that it doesn't get damaged during the winter and freezes or frosts. Two, it's going to leave everything organized. And three, you're going to really prep your soil so that when spring comes, you've got a lot less work to do. When everything is busting forth, blooming, and it's go time in the garden, you're not really having to go backwards and really clean up a whole lot. You're just going to do some basic soil preps and get into the soil. So one of the first things I want to do when I'm out here, which we've already started on, is just getting our sprinkler system up and out of the garden, out of the way, so we're not breaking it when we're working in here, so it's not getting damaged by the freezes. And we've already done a lot of that. I've started using this Dan micro system. It's great, but it's got a lot of fine parts in it, and it detaches easily from the main hose, and I just don't want this getting damaged in the freezes. So we've already detached it. I'm gonna go ahead and clean all these up and just basically get our hoses either put to the side or put away. Okay, so I've got all of our watering system, our sprinklers, any of our hoses that I'm concerned about hung up in a nice place where they're well taken care of. They're drained, they're not gonna freeze and break or anything on us. Or some of our mainline hoses that are feeding the irrigation, they're fine to stay out here, but again, I've drained them, I've left all the valves open, and everything's just set to go so we can unroll it in the spring, and I'm not worried about damage during the winter. All right, so for us, the next thing we're gonna do is take down our DIY hoop house. And if you guys remember this, we took the bean tunnels I built and we put up greenhouse plastic over this and made a great hoop house. And this thing has been great for us this year. We're gonna do it again next year. We like the system. We'll probably make a few improvements to it, but we get a lot of snow. If I leave that on there, it's gonna collapse. So if you have any systems like that, or if you did any impromptu systems, and especially if it's in the snow, make sure it can hold up to your winter conditions. All right, so if you have strung anything up, you know, if you've had to divine anything up, some string lines or tied stuff up, hopefully you have used an organic material like this jute. And what's really great is we can just take this down. I don't have to unravel it from the plants or try to separate it. This is all gonna go into the compost pile and it will break down just fine. Makes our job much, much easier. Okay, so one of the next jobs, we're getting all the plant material cut down. Like I said, leaving the roots in. But what I do not do is leave the roots in on these weeds. because they will come back. And a lot of these are deep rooted. They've got tap roots and the mallow, and I'm not sure what this one is, but I don't want those coming back and getting ahead of me, fighting with them, going to seed. So we do pull all of the weeds. Especially grasses. Thankfully, we don't have grasses real bad, but boy, if they get ahead of you, and of course all of these proliferate by the root, so we want to get all of those up as well, pulled out. Okay, so you can see we've just about got our rows all cleaned up and ready for compost and or mulch. But first, you want to walk through and get rid of all your little identifiers. Don't want to bury those, don't want to be digging into them later. So I'm just going to walk through and do a quick cleanup. Real good to try to get all of these. All right, so we have gotten everything about cleaned up here, and our beds are looking good, and we're ready to amend them. Now you can do a few different things right here with these beds. We can pull the mulch aside, compost, put mulch back. It's one way to go about it. You want to add an amendment no matter what, so this is the time to add compost. And in these beds here, this compost from the season has broken down enough that I'm not really worried about it. There's very little here. So I'm just gonna compost right over this and add at least an inch of compost. And if you've seen some of my past videos, I usually mulch on top of that. But as we're establishing these garden beds in our systems here, I actually wanna move away from having to compost and mulch every year where I don't have to. And so a compost like we've made here ourselves, which we're filling up the BCS to spread it right now, is about 80% finished, and it's great. It's gonna work as a compost, sit here all winter, soak into the soil, and then it works just fine for a mulch in most situations. There's a few other situations in the garden where I'll go ahead and mulch over that. But for prepping these beds for winter, just laying this compost down is gonna be great. Okay, so we've gotten a few rows done with the BCS and the compost spreader, but you may not have a compost spreader unless you've got long rows and a large garden. You don't really need one. If you do, I'd really recommend you check out that BCS and the compost spreader because it is really, really efficient. But a lot of the times you just don't need that. You're gonna do it by hand. And of course, in our tunnels here, we just can't even get that machine in here. And we're gonna just go ahead and spread it by hand. And in this case, this mulch is a little thick still. A lot of that other mulch had broken down. This was in the hoop house this year. It didn't break down. And so I don't wanna bury this. So I'm gonna take just a few minutes and pull a little bit off of the top, and then we'll start laying the compost down. Okay, so we've got these rows done in the bean tunnel, And this is good to go, or you can add mulch to this if you want. I did a video last year on mulching. I'll leave you a link in that down below. But I'm trying something different this year and using this compost that's really just composted mulch with some manure added that can continue to break down, and hopefully for our cold climate will warm the soil up a bit faster. And we've got a couple areas like our garlic that I will mulch before it gets too cold this year. And either way you go, this is good to go for us. You may want to add that mulch in your area. And one last thing you may want to do, most of my rows are good, but if you mulch your rows, like this has got plenty of mulch in here in your walkways, I'm sorry, not your rows. And what that's going to do, besides helping retain moisture and you know, diminish the effects of compaction as you're walking through here, it's also going to allow you to get into your garden much earlier because it won't be all muddy and wet right here. And particularly if you have clay soil, this is really, really nice. So if you get this in the winter, you're going to be able to get into your garden a lot earlier in the spring. Well, that's about it. If you've done everything I've showed you here, you are going to be real set for springtime, and you're just going to have to roll out. You're not going to have to go back and deal with plants that have started to decompose and have fallen down or hard to work with. Your compost and your amendment is already in the soil, and depending on what you're planting and what you're doing in each row, you may be able to just plant right in it, like in these beds here. We'll just be able to put our starts right in here. In some other areas, we may want to broad fork it and loosen it up, rake it over, and then plant our seed. But this is basically ready to go. Putting it to bed, and when spring comes, we can get right out here, get our hands in the soil, and get to work. Hope this has been helpful, and hope you guys have a good winter as far as gardening goes, and I'll see you back out here in the spring.